Hello and welcome to the Edify Podcast. This is designed for you, preacher, teacher, shepherd, deacon of the kingdom of God, for your edification, for your uplifting, for your ministry. When darkness veils his lovely face, I rest on his unchanging grace. Does darkness veil his face, or does it seem to darken his face is the idea. That line in that song was changed a few years ago by one particular group to say his face isn't really darkened, it just seems to be that way because of the problem. I want to ask you, I know we've shifted gears and went into faithful endurance and faithful ministry and sticking to those things, and I want to stay in that, but I want to give some practical application today. Not a very long podcast. I know we've been burning 26 to 30 minutes depending. Some of you like that, some of you don't. Some of you prefer the 10 to 15 minutes. Today's is going to be a little bit shorter, but it's very practical. And I want to talk about, mercy and severe. Mercy is still mercy still. What do you do when darkness begins to hide the lovely face of God? Or his providential voice, his providential hand, his providential leading, those sorts of things. When it seems like you don't really know what's going on and you're bewildered. You and I all, especially in church work, can be, we can have nightmares about this. It can become the norm. It becomes something that we just come to expect. In 1 Corinthians 15:32, Paul said that he was fighting wild beasts in Ephesus. So, which is, gladiatorial imagery, but really he was describing the intense relational conflicts and the spiritual warfare that was going on there. That's a reality for all of us, and all of us are in need of triage care from time to time. And there's different portions of 2 Corinthians, and I've learned a lot from 2 Corinthians. I taught it in our adult Bible class last quarter, and learned a whole lot of things. And especially for me, if you've not gleaned a whole lot of 2 Corinthians for your ministry, I pray that you would, especially in the dark times or the dark seasons. But I want to go through a short 7-step, if you will, what's really going to help you in the long-term care of faithful ministry. Number 1, tell a good friend what hurts. Do not suffer in silence. Don't suffer in isolation, pride, etc. Gather up your friends, your most inner confidants, and get a proper diagnosis. Am I in the wrong? Am I right for feeling this way? Have I misconceived something? Have I misunderstood something? Paul gave us a very maybe unannounced in some ways, but a very important gift in chapter 1 and verse 8 of 2 Corinthians when he told the brethren there. He says, we don't want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction that we experienced in Asia. He was letting others know just how difficult the situation had become. He wanted them to know that he was suffering for the Lord, not only for the proof of his ministry, but for the sake of prayers, of camaraderie and accountability. Let me ask you this question. Who knows how bad that you're actually hurting? Some of us are feared of being labeled as soft or whiny or whatever, fill in the blank. Some of us fear losing our jobs. Some of you feel like that you can't go to your leadership or your eldership and tell them exactly how you feel. That's awful. That's sad. That's so sad when the preacher can't be shepherded by the elders. Some of us maybe are too proud to be known in this way or to seek help in some kind of way. Some of us are clueless about how dangerously ill that we really, really are. I need medical. I need emotional. I need spiritual care. So do you. So does every single person who has ever walked this world. Start with your most trusted friends. Your health will begin to fall apart in front of you in so many ways, but your journey to good health can begin to build back up if you're just honest and you tell good friends exactly how bad you're hurting. So number 1, tell your friends. Number 2, be more honest about your pain. Allow yourself to feel that pain. Allow yourself to know that pain and to see it for what it is pain. I went through a very, very hard, difficult time, and did some grieving probably about 4 or 5 years ago now at this point. And and the whole time, I really didn't allow myself to have pain. I didn't have time. I didn't. Nobody was there to care for me in those ways. Nobody knew what was going on. I felt afraid to tell people of what was happening and what was going on and what I was experiencing and what was betraying me and those sorts of things. It's just a very difficult, sad situation just for me personally. And I really didn't allow myself to hurt. I just kind of had this mindset to say, I actually deserve physical hell. So anything God gives me is a blessing. People would say all the time, well, you deserve this, and you deserve that, and you deserve this, and you deserve that. Well, no, realistically, we all deserve hell, and we don't deserve the goodness of God. And so when I was being withheld of a blessing in that time, then that was a providential, sovereign God withholding something from me. I learned a whole lot. I was able to endure a whole lot of things. But I should have been more honest with my pain, more honest with my situation. Should have had trusted friends, and I had some, but I didn't want to tell them. I was just so sick about the situation, and so embarrassed about something that was going on, and that was just a sad time for something that was happening to me in my life. So I want to tell you, be more honest about your pain. Resist the temptation to minimize your suffering or to discount your pain. When you go to the Fox's Book of Martyrs, you can say, well, they died for the Lord. Or you can say, well, Jesus didn't cry a whole lot, and Paul didn't cry a whole lot, this, that, and the other. But comparing your suffering to the suffering of other people, the gospel makes us very human, not superhuman, but more human. So when Paul says that we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself, indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death, in chapter 1, 8, and 9 of 2 Corinthians, it sounds like your trauma, my trauma, your pain, my pain, your weariness, mine and yours, taking that seriously. Paul said, we've told others about our situation, and we told them exactly how we feel. We were honest about how we feel. You and I are going to experience burnout. If we haven't already, we will at some point. You can experience burnout when the church is doing great. But not being aware of how much backed up pain and emotional exhaustion and spiritual depletion that you yourself are carrying. You've lifted them and you've carried them for so long. You've worked alongside the eldership, or you've worked in the eldership if you're an elder or a deacon or whatever. And it's not just your body, but it's your heart and it's your mind. It's your soul that keeps the tally. So be honest about it. Number 3, surrender any sense of self-sufficiency, okay? We're specifically told, if any man ministers, let him minister with the ability which God supplies, that God in all things might be glorified, okay? If I run my ministry off of my strength and what I can do and what I provide, etc., then the ministry is my ministry and I get the glory from it. Quickly get off the pedestal, give God all the glory, all the sufficiency for what takes place. Mark chapter 2, 1 through 5, Jesus is there, and there's friends who bring this paralyzed man to the mat. Take your turn on the mat, okay? Allow your friends to carry you to the Lord, and get over the myth and cult of self-sufficiency. It's a lie, okay? I need to hear those things, and you do too. 2 Corinthians 1, 9, even through verse 11, he says, this was to make us to rely not on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. He delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us, and he will deliver you by prayer. So there's no one better modeled an aversion to self-reliance and a constant surrender to praying friends than the Apostle Paul. Follow that example. You've got to be in triage mode sometimes, especially when you're going through burnout. There's no need or time really to start avoiding these things. Just go, who are your praying friends? Go to the ones who love you the most, who you trust the most, who are righteous people, and go with them. These people are in your gospel posse. Get on the mat and let them carry you to the Lord, and humble yourself. We can be so great at carrying other people than letting other people carry us. That's not nobility, that's stupidity. Self-reliance and the gospel are anti-theoretical, okay? Grace always runs downhill, and sometimes through unexpected means. He says in chapter 7, verses 5 through 6, he says, our bodies had no rest. We were afflicted at every turn, fighting without and fear within. But God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus. And of course, that's 2 Corinthians. Learn to receive comfort from whomever the Lord providentially sends your way. So those are three things in regards to short triage care. A personal situation, something that's happening now. You've got to tell a good friend what hurts. You've got to be honest about your pain and to surrender that self-sufficiency. So let's shift to the long-term care. Your bleeding has stopped from this situation. We begin to walk again. The burnout's beginning to heal, or whatever the situation is, and we begin walking with the help of a good counselor. Okay, we've shifted matters from spiritual to mental long-term health. Okay. You've got a good counselor in your mix. You continue to have the mutual burden-bearing friendships, okay? And maybe it's the case you need appropriate medical care. There's no shame in that. And there are some long-term measures that I want you to put in place that have been beneficial, that research says to do, and especially spiritual research. Really just disciplines and delights that can remain with you and for you forever. Number one, spend more time looking at Jesus. Spend more time than you ever have before beholding and contemplating the beauty of Jesus. Don't just appreciate Paul's spirituality, okay, and what he did in that short-term triage, but practice it. Chapter 3 and verse 18, he says, we all with an unveiled face, beholding the glory of God, or of the Lord rather, we are becoming transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. So for this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. So leading up to your burnout and mine, we can replace abiding in Jesus with working for Jesus. So Satan's main goal is to rob us of the intimacy that we have with Jesus. In chapter 11, verse 3, he says, I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, your thoughts will be led astray from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ. Communing with Jesus and adoring him, fellas, it always has to take precedence over the demands of a job description, people's expectations, the tyranny of the urgent. This is a conviction that needs to lead you to transition out of being, lead dog up front for X number of years that you've been doing so, and just shift this to say, hey, I'm here to focus on Jesus, number one, and then I'll focus on you secondary. It has to go that way. Jesus is true. He is good. He is beautiful. And often the convergence of prolonged spiritual attack, relational conflicts, that's easy. Mental, emotional stress is going to rob us of the beauty of Jesus. And so we lose our sense of his goodness. So finally we begin to question the truth of the gospel, which is not what we want to do, and the trustworthiness of Jesus. So number one, spend more time looking at him. Number two, prepare yourself for the pain of the not yet. Develop a greater appreciation for the, quote, already and not yet of life and ministry between the resurrection and the return of Jesus. 2 Corinthians 6, 8 through 10, Paul says, we are treated as impostors and yet are true, as unknown and yet well known, as dying and behold, we live, as punished and yet not killed, as sorrowful yet always rejoicing, as poor yet making many rich, as having nothing yet possessing everything. The ministry of the gospel, you're in it, I'm in it. The service of it, this side of life in this heaven, or this earth that we live in, is going to include incredible blessings, but also unimaginable difficulty. If you stay in any particular church or ministry or service to the kingdom long enough, you're going to be both disappointed and disappointing, because we enjoyed so many things in ministry. We do so many things for the church. we have to be well aware, fellas, that something bad, something burdensome, is coming. Even though things can be great, the devil will come and rattle those cages. So have an expectation. Don't ask the question why, but ask the question why not. Why should we not have to suffer? Why should we not have to endure things? So to have that in mind is good for us. Number 3, receive your weaknesses. Learn to accept and delight in your weaknesses. Now that may sound strange, but you accept your strengths, and you know your strengths, and you love your strengths. And although we hate a weakness per se, there's some things about our insufficiency that we need to accept and that we need to appreciate. Jesus is the only one without those things. And if I begin to think, or if I don't begin to appreciate and welcome the humbleness that is coming my way because of my weaknesses, then I'm in trouble. Don't wait for the broken downness to start living in the gospel brokenness. What I mean is that we matter, but we're not the main point. Chapter 4 and verse 7, Paul says, we have this treasure in jars of clay to show the surpassing worth belongs to God and not us. My grace is sufficient for you, he would say in chapter 12 and verse 9. My power is made perfect in weakness, therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Be aware of your weaknesses. Be aware of your brokenness, of your limitations. And boast in those things, and be honest about those things, so that when good has been done, it's been done through you, which is great, but it's been done through you because of God and not of you. So live and minister with so much less stress. Schedule may be full, but listen, you know that you're a person of not sufficiency, but competency. You're willing to do, and you're willing to go, and you're willing to serve, but you give yourself grace to know, hey, I have weaknesses and I have limitations. Number 4, visit the home to come. Become a curious, childlike explorer of the hope of heaven and this fullness of what is to come, this new, okay, where we will enjoy forever when Jesus returns. Following Paul's example, we may not, well, let me put it this way. Following Paul's example, I, and maybe you, have never spent as much time meditating on heaven and groaning for our coming life as it was. In this tent, Paul said, we groan, longing to put on our heavenly dwelling. He who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. And then he would go on to say, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, and the new is, and behold, the new has come. 2 Corinthians 5, that's verse 2, verse 5, and verse 17. And Revelation 21 through all the way, chapter 22 and verse 6. Nothing else can help you overcome your spiritual depression, your deep shame, your emotional pain in ministry, more than connecting your head and your heart with the glorious hope of heaven. I hope these have been beneficial to you. Go back, revisit them. Please share these with other folks. Write this down, preach it, give it to your elders, give it to your deacons, remind them, let them know, hey, I love you, but you're going to experience these things, and I want to prepare you beforehand. Or you're going through this now, and I want to give you this now. This has helped me. This has helped others. This is tried, true, and tested. It's the original OG way to do it. And so God be with you in your serving those who are serving.